everybody. I am Reverend Sherman D. Manning, the proud pastor of Yes We Can Worship Center. Yes We Can Worship Center is located at 5857 South Central Avenue, Suite 180. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Los Angeles, California. We have services every Friday night at 7 o'clock p.m. It is an hour of power, and we invite you to join us this Friday night. I am at a loss for words, which is hard for a preacher to be. When I think about the kind of president you all have elected, you have elected a madman, not a strong man, but a madman. In some sense, we have Adolf Hitler living at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What a devil. When you look at what is going on with Michael Flynn, and the more things that come out, the worse it looks for the Donald administration. Here is a man who met at the White House with the commander-in-chief and the, at that time, current president, and the president leaned over and told him that he should not hire Michael Flynn. And yet he did so anyway. And it fascinates me how Donald always just assumes that everybody is stupid. But, you know, in his defense, it works for him because I guess there are enough people who are stupid and or just don't pay attention to detail that when he offers off these smoke screens and sends out these inaccurate texts that are deliberately manipulative and duplicitous, many of his crowd believes what he says and just don't question what he says. But listen to me clearly. He is now blaming the vetting of Michael Flynn on the Obama administration. But it turns out that President Obama fired Flynn in 2014. So first and foremost, even if the Obama administration had vetted this guy once he was fired, then it would be incumbent upon the next person who hired him to indeed vet him. I'm a security guard. I'm an armed security guard. And I am fired from one company in 2014. In 2017, you decide that you want to hire me as a security guard. Don't you think it would be incumbent upon you to check my license to carry a gun, to check all of my permits and certifications and see if you follow what I'm saying? You follow my train of thought? And that is a weak example. I think if I were a police officer and I was fired in Tucson, Arizona for whatever, and you decided that you might hire me in Los Angeles in 2016 to be a police officer, the first thing you want to know is about that firing. Why was I fired? And you're going to look closely at me to see if I qualify to be a police officer in LA. Moreover, it turns out that the entire Donald tweet is a complete and utter deception, because we learned from James Clapper yesterday, who was in charge of intelligence under the Obama administration. We learned from him that even if Obama had not fired Flynn, which he did, keep that in mind. This is conjecture, and we're playing a lot of hypotheticals here. So let's say Mr. Obama did not fire Flynn, and Trump comes in and wants to hire him as National Security Advisor. That's a promotion from the job that he had working for President Obama. And it turns out that James Clapper states that it is policy that when you're being hired for a position that is that high, National Security Advisor, you go through a closer scrutiny, a higher level of security clearance than Flynn had before, even when he worked for the Obama administration. So the bottom line is Trump is lying again. How do you know when he's lying? Easy, when his lips are moving. And in this instance, when his fingers are typing and tweeting, he's lying. So let me say that all once again. So I'm going to put it in layman's terminology. Okay, so I'm working as a security guard and I am a sergeant and I have a security clearance. Okay, first and foremost, I got fired as a sergeant. So when you decide to bring me on for your security company and I've applied for a position as a captain, which is a higher position, the vetting process for that position would be higher than it would be for the position that I had before. And when you add to that and compound the issue that I was fired, you follow my train of thought? So the bottom line is, even if the man had not been fired, the position to which he aspired to work for in the Trump administration required a higher level of scrutiny and a higher level of vetting. So you cannot simply say, oh, he was already vetted by the last administration that happened to fire him in 2014, because the vetting process is higher for a person who is going to become the National Security Advisor of the United States of America. And I will admit that if I were not interested in politics and I just heard a little blanket statement by Donald stating that, hey, he was already vetted by the Obama administration, I would probably think, yeah, he's right. That's Obama's fault. They should have called this or they should have called that. And a lot of the things that happened to disqualify Flynn happened after Obama had fired him. Many of the things, to go on to Russia, they're getting the $34,000 from Russia, sitting next to Putin and all those things happened after 2014. Some of them happened in 2016 while he was not working for the Obama administration because he had been fired. So Donald's lie about having no need to vet him because he was vetted by the Obama administration is deceptive on his face. I'm going to repeat just for redundancy, because I know that he's going to be tweeting later on. Even if the man had not been fired by the Obama administration, which he was, the new position that Trump was going to hire him for and eventually hired him for required a closer scrutiny, a higher level of security clearance, ipso facto, a new vetting, because he had never been vetted to that level before. He had never been vetted to that extent. He had never been vetted that deep. The depth wasn't like that, and it was not necessary. Another layman's example would be a police officer. A person becomes a police officer, that background is checked, that record is checked. Let's go here instead. Security officer. A security guard is vetted in some sense. His background is vetted. But I guarantee you that they're going to pay closer scrutiny to the background of a police officer to be than they would be a security guard to be. One of the reasons, a police officer has more power. So just because I qualify to be an armed security guard and can have a gun does not mean that I meet the status or the level of scrutiny that is necessary to become a police officer. And do you think a police department will say, well, we don't need to vet him. He's already a security guard. He has a gun already. He's already been vetted. So we're going to hire him. Wouldn't make any sense with it. Let's go deeper. You could be a police officer and yet apply to the FBI and get rejected. It happens every day of the week. Call the FBI and you'll find that out. Rejected because you don't pass muster. Your background doesn't pass the smell test. When you're going to become an FBI agent, I happen to have a little bit of an intimate experience with that because one of my neighbors became an FBI agent and she had already been a police officer. And watch this. When she became a police officer, no one came to our house to interview us. No one from the police department talked with my family at all when she became an Atlanta police officer. But when she decided to become an FBI agent, they interviewed everybody in the house. The feds did, including the children, to ask us what kind of reputation she had, how did she act, did we see her do drugs, did we see her drink alcohol, all kinds of things, moral questions about morality, because an FBI agent has more power than a police officer. So Flynn had less power in the Obama administration. He was certainly not a national security advisor. So his new level of power with the Trump administration required a new round and a new level of scrutiny, even if it were not for that big old mountain of a fact that he had been fired by the last administration. So my question is, when are we going to wake up as Americans and start listening to what is being said, paying attention, taking note, and stop being hoodwinked? You talk about messaging. I wish I had a larger platform so that I could get out there and explain stuff like I just explained. And it's not that I'm smart. I just pay attention. I'm probably not that bright of a guy if I'm going to be candid, but I certainly am a master at paying attention to what's going on and what's being said and what's being done. Mentioning paying attention, please pay attention to this number, 213-377-8681. 213-377-8681. If you would like for this podcast to continue, I need you to call that number or text that number. The only thing I want you to do is tell me that you heard this podcast so that I know that we're actually reaching people. According to Spreaker.com, someone is listening to me in Decatur, Georgia right now, right outside my hometown. According to Spreaker, someone is listening to me in Delaware. Someone is listening to me in New England and in the United Kingdom. People in San Jose, California, in Menlo Park, California. So if you are listening to this podcast right now, or if you download it later on today and listen to it, whenever you hear it, do me one small favor, please. Text or call 213-377-8681 and simply tell me that you did hear the podcast and tell me what city you're in. That would be very, very helpful in me deciding whether or not we continue to do this podcast, because it costs me money to do the podcast, okay? It's not free. 213-377. Two 377 Text me or call me and tell me that you did hear this podcast. And if you know anyone in Los Angeles, tell them to join me at Yes We Can Worship Center for 1 hour of power on Friday. We will have a service that begins at 7 o'clock p.m., after which we will be giving away free food. 5857 South Central Avenue, Suite 180. Tell it everywhere you go. We want people to know we are at the corner of Central and Slauson. We're behind the CVS drugstore, right next door to Cricket. Don't miss it. Be there. God bless you.